Hei alle sammen, og velkommen til sosialarbeiderpodden. Mitt navn er Ole, og i denne episoden har jeg fått besøk av 2 internasjonale gjester. Det har seg nemlig sånn at FO er en del av den internasjonale sosialarbeiderforeningen som heter International Federation of Social Work, eller IFSW som vi ofte forkorter det til. Og IFSW, det er altså vår globale sammenslutning av sosialarbeiderforbund med medlemsland fra alle verdensdeler. Organisasjonen jobber for å fremme samarbeid og læring på tvers av landegrenser, for ikke å snakke om den politiske plattformen det er for sosialt arbeid på verdensbasis. Nå tenkte jeg å la våre 2 representanter fra IFSW gå noe mer i dybden på hvem de er og hva de holder på med, så hvis dere kan bære med meg, så skal jeg gjøre et stødig forsøk på å lose oss gjennom de neste minutter på engelsk. And this is where I introduce my 2 guests for today. We are so lucky to have the Secretary General of the International Federation of Social Work, Rory Truell, with us. Welcome to you.
Oh, thank you. It's so good to be here.
Also, we have Anna Radulesco with us, and she is the European Regional President of the IFSW. Welcome to you as well.
Thank you for the invitation.
We usually start our episodes by asking our guests to give a brief introduction of themselves. I have briefly mentioned who you are, but with your own words, how would you describe who you are? Let's start with you, Rory.
Well, my name is Rory, as you said. Thank you so much for inviting us today. I'm the Secretary General of the International Federation of Social Workers. My background is that I grew up in New Zealand, but with this job we have our headquarters based in Switzerland, so I'm now based there.
Great. And Anna?
I'm a social worker. I'm based in Romania, and as a practitioner I'm connected with response to disasters. Therefore, I combine my expertise with my role in IFSW, now working in Ukraine.
Great. And we are pleased to have you both with us, but let's move on to the organization you represent. Can you give us an introduction to IFSW? What is this organization all about?
So IFSW has been around a very long time. It was actually founded in 1928, and so it was founded when national associations of social work came together to develop an international set of standards and policies. And the good thing about that is whether you've trained in Norway or whether you've trained in Kenya, you'll be able to look at social work in different countries and say, I know what's happening there, I know what they're doing, because we do have international standards and international policies. So now we've grown to, we have 150 national associations of social work, and they come together regularly to discuss and debate and make sure that our policies are relevant for every country.
And Anna, you're the European representative.
IFSW is the community, the professional community for social workers. It's the space where we share our knowledge and where we develop our responses. And since the pandemic, we learned that this is the space where we share all our knowledge and expertise in order to be more adapted to the needs of the people. Okay,
so you are sort of coordinating social workers all over the globe. I mean, what are the activities in IFSW?
So we learn from each other. So Anna mentioned the pandemic, which is a wonderful example. So immediately as the pandemic started in Wuhan in China, the Chinese Association of Social Workers informed the other national associations all over the world what they are doing, what they did in the first 48 hours, what they did in the first 72 hours. And we as a profession have been through other pandemics. We've been through SARS, HIV, Ebola, and we've learned what our role is, and we've learned how to advise governments and how to advise communities on responding to pandemics. So we started sharing information, and we're able to, well ahead of the governments, start to prepare social services and also advocate and advise ministers and government on what they need to do as well.
So it's also a resource for social workers themselves, but also there's a political dimension to the organization.
Yes, it is a political dimension, because in the response we build for people together with people, sometimes we need also changes which only can come from the politicians. So an important part of what we are doing is to advise, to counsel, or to recommend and ask some changes which make the social workers context possible, and to get also tools from the legislation. And in many situations we are not able to bring the resources or activate resources if we don't have the legislation mechanism. So yes, it is also a political dimension of social work profession.
And with like it was 150 countries who is like a member of IFSW, you must have quite a broad perspective of the issues around the world. And in a global context, there are many things we could have been talking about, but what are the main issues concerning you right now?
Well, right at the moment, there's a lot going on in the world. We've got an increase of wars. We've got increased inflation as a consequence of that across the world. We've got earthquakes in Syria and Turkey, and we're seeing a rise in authoritarian governments. So there's a really major set of themes about supporting people in those situations and supporting them to also be a part of the solutions, not providing a service to them, not providing aid to them, but actually recognising that people in those situations are really key to working out the solutions.
Social work profession is changing a long way with all the social changes happening and economic changes. So each time something is happening in Europe but around the world, we need to develop different skills, knowledge, approaches, perspectives, methods. So we need to share with each other, because for sure somewhere in the world there was somebody challenge with the same situation. So this is giving us the possibility to learn from each other and to be more adapted to what is changing around us.
And I mean, looking at the previous years, there has been a different crisis, and it is uncertain times we are living in. I mean, would you say that one crisis prepares you better for the next one, or does each one have their own way of developing?
Yes, I mean, in the International Federation, we constantly are learning. We're constantly learning from this situation. What could we improve in the next time? So a really interesting example of that is that in 2015, there was a wave of refugees. There was a refugee crisis because of the Syrian war. And we've learned from that. We thought, what can we do differently this time with the Ukrainian refugees? How can we make a difference? And one of the key factors in our response to that was that the Syrian refugees themselves needed to lead their own development. They needed to be in charge of decision-making that affected them. And we wanted to avoid the situation we saw in 2015, where many refugees were put into kind of temporary camps, sometimes with tents or sometimes with containers. And unfortunately, in some countries in Europe, they're still there. And it doesn't recognise their skill, it doesn't recognise their ability to contribute to outcomes and contribute to solutions for themselves. So this time we were really, really focused on not top-down processes, but bottom-up processes, where the refugees themselves could be an answer to the dilemmas that they face.
That's interesting perspectives. I mean, of course, there are many things going on right now, but you have both talked a bit about Ukraine and the situation there. It's been over a year since the war broke loose. But looking back at the start of the war, what was your first impressions or experiences? Anna, you were close to.
Yeah, I was involved in this response since the first day of the war, and I was aware that social workers were needed along with a humanitarian response, but I was also aware that, at least in this part of the world, we did not have enough knowledge about how social workers can respond to these situations. IFSW is a keeper of knowledge management or knowledge in the profession, but we really needed some connection immediately, because we just wake up in the morning with this disaster. And the first thing we did, it was to look how we can equip social workers with the knowledge and skills in the way during the activities. And it was a challenge for us. It is still a challenge for us. We are now located in Ukraine and work with social workers in Ukraine. Nothing could prepare us for what is happening now. But our base of the profession, which is directing us to work with people, gave us the biggest gift possible, because now, being in Ukraine, working with people there, we can build up together with them, based on their needs, based on our knowledge. We can find the best solution along the way for a situation that is changing all the time, because this is the problem in Ukraine. The situation is changing so fast from one day to another. So I think our feeling is that each day we have to keep ourselves reflecting, finding, learning, asking colleagues with the same experience to help us. And with this, we are managing every day.
So it's an unpredictable situation going on right now, of course. What can you tell us about our social work colleagues in Ukraine now? What is their role in the society they are living in, sort of?
They have an important role to help people to process and to manage the stress of the war context. But they are also part of it. They are going through the same experience. They are running with the same people on the ground when the alarms start. And for them, being in the middle of the problem and at the same time being a resource for others, it is very difficult. And also they were not trained for this kind of response. We are going to we are in Ukraine supporting them, that they are able to support people the best possible way.
Yeah, because we talked about this a bit earlier, Rory, that, I mean, you have also been in Ukraine quite a few times now and met people there. What has been your impressions and experiences?
Well, there's no doubt that it's extremely difficult for all people in Ukraine, including the social workers. Sometimes it's even harder for social workers because they take care of other people. But I want to say that there's a key feature for social work in every country, and that is that we recognise the strengths and the resources in the communities and in people. And this is different from the international aid agencies. International aid agencies have a place and they do a good job. But social workers are involved in Ukraine in helping build community systems that also provide protection, a first level of protection. And so one of the extraordinary things that Anna's been involved with in leading is setting up a community social work centre in Ukraine, which engages citizens, engages internally displaced people, recognising that there's a huge amount of talent and skill that sit within that population. And how can they contribute to each other? How can they support each other? And now this particular community social work centre has thousands of people coming in every day, offering courses to others, offering solutions to others, engaging with others, setting up all sorts of different activities, which Anna can give a lot more detail about than I can.
Yeah, because this is actually happening in Ukraine.
Yes, it's happening in Ukraine. And, the war consequence was that people had a feeling that they lose control on their life. And that's why, along with humanitarian support, they also need a different kind of support which comes from social workers and is connected with they get back their control of their life, start making decisions about their life, start to understand that they are still able to predict the day tomorrow. Predictability is a power that we have to stay in control of our life. And I think that's why social workers were so valuable during this intervention, during this support response, because people needed more than humanitarian aid. And they continue to run their life. And for us, social workers, it's important that they don't lose this power of making decisions for their life. And this was an important part of what we did.
Exactly, because this sort of brings us into the perspective of empowerment, which is like a core perspective in social work, that you strengthen people to also manage their life themselves, because even in difficult times, they have resources that they can make use of.
All people have incredible resources that sometimes even governments are blind to. In Ukraine, we've discovered that people can organise a community kitchen and produce from one centre, one little room, 1,200 meals per day, which can be transported across the region, across the country. We've found people have clothing skills, tailoring skills, and can produce winter clothing for each other, making furniture for internally displaced people. And what this does, when social workers encourage this, is that it helps build the social and also the financial economy. We've got to remember, in Ukraine, since the beginning of the invasion, the economy came to a stop. People stopped being paid. People stopped going to work. People stopped going to schools. Manufacturing closed. One of the challenges with humanitarian aid, and as I say, it's really important, but is when it's in a prolonged situation, people who make clothes can't compete with clothes that have been donated or food that has been donated. So one of the things that social workers are doing is trying to balance humanitarian aid with self-sufficiency, with self-reliance. And when you talk to the people that are in the community kitchens, that are running courses for each other, and we're talking hundreds and thousands of people, you know, what's this like for you? And they say, it's fantastic. I thank God that I can come here every day, because staying at home in my apartment is just unbearable. Because it gives people a role. It gives people a sense of purpose. They're contributing to something.
That's interesting also, because, I mean, there has been a lot of, at least like I can see from a Norwegian context that many people want to contribute from Norway, and a lot of the things that we have been doing is collecting clothes, for example, sending it to Ukraine with big trucks and everything. I mean, with all good intentions, of course. But what you see, I mean, when you have been in Ukraine, when you have talked to social workers and the communities there, what are the needs?
Along with the immediate needs that you mentioned also, they also need knowledge. And I talk about our area, social work area. They need knowledge because before the war, there were no social services, this kind of services, support services that we have in our countries. There were no such services, and social workers were not really trained in this direction to develop this kind of services. So now they realize that they need a different support, and they are open to develop different approaches that fit to the needs of people, but they don't know how to do it. And now is the worst context because there is a lot of stress around, there are a lot of problems around, no resources, but still what we discussed today with the colleagues in Norway, it was that we will have a group of social workers, just to give you an example, a group of social workers that they are going to learn how to develop social services as a support to people. And they will need different models, different approaches. They will need the experience from Norway and from other Nordic countries. And it will be great to have a kind of coach, social workers from Norway to coach social workers in Ukraine how to build the best response through these social services. So different kind of support can be provided, of course, focusing on knowledge.
Because, I mean, FO and many other of the members of IFSW have granted financial support to the efforts in Ukraine. I mean, granted to IFSW. And is this, I mean, if you were to talk about, I mean, I guess you have already done it, but if you were to talk about what is the response of IFSW, is this one of the main efforts providing knowledge and...
Yes, I mean, well, I tend to use the term inside-out development. So decisions are made in the inside by the local communities, the local social workers, the local people in Ukraine. And they're not shy to make decisions. They're skilled, capable people to be able to do that. But they're looking for ideas, models on how to develop their systems under war conditions right now, but also in the long term. It's really wonderful. You can go to a community environment now around the social works community centre, and you hear people from the community. I'm not talking about social workers, normal people from the community, and they say, when this war is over, how can we keep what we've learned here going? How can we, when the other refugees come home, how can we make sure they come home to communities, not just apartment buildings? How can we support children who have lost their parents in the long run? And so out of this tragedy, the local people, with the support of Anna and other international social workers, have found something they didn't know that they had. And that is the strength of working together to support each other. And I think that's the challenge for every community in every part of the world, is finding that strength. And we're all learning from this situation in Ukraine as Ukraine has learned from other situations.
Well, this is, it's inspiring to listen to this. And I mean, of course, there are a lot of resources becoming visible with the community in Ukraine now. And I guess it is during times like this, we understand the value of being in an organization where we coordinate skills and exchange experiences.
That's right. I mean, we have learned about social work and war conditions from other countries. And another country that immediately is that's still in war, that immediately is started to share their experiences, Yemen, which has been under terrible war and terrible context of sanctions for a long time now. And they're working with community without resources. And when I'm talking about without resources, basically they don't have roads anymore, they don't have buildings, they don't have hospitals, they don't have schools anymore as a result of a prolonged war. And so they've had to rely on community strengths. And that's helped pave the way. In Northern Ireland, from the troubles that they had there 20 years ago, we've learned about how to respond to community trauma. Rather than thinking of responding to PTSD in an individual context, it's about public information, public sharing of understandings, about acknowledgement, about building tolerance around people with traumatic conditions, about being able to advise doctors and hospitals and other professions on how to support people through a traumatic process, bringing communities together to be able to mutually support each other. So it's a constant learning process.
Of course, and I guess I mean they are in need of support in Ukraine now, and but there are also a lot of Ukrainians who have been forced to flee to other countries. The predictions in Norway are that we will receive more or less, I think it was 75,000 Ukrainians. Is the predictions for 2022 and 2023. What do you reckon will be the most important role of social workers when welcoming refugees?
I think it's a double role. One role is connected to it, the fact that people are coming to Norway. And the second is that one day people would like to go back to Ukraine. And I think both both situations require a kind of support that this is happening, and they adapt to the context and to the decision they are making. Many Ukrainians are saying that they want to go back to their country when the war stops. At the moment, of course, it's very difficult. Not only that, the war is affecting communities, and it's affecting also the economical situation, the social situation there. So it's very hard to live in Ukraine at the moment. But one day probably they would like to go back, and then they will need social workers here and also social worker there, because they have to restart their life. So we will be connected with helping them to find the best strategy, and also to find the resources, and also to find the way that they restart their life in Ukraine, but also they are able to bring with them the knowledge they get from Norway and from our countries where they stayed for a while.
It's really important also for social workers in asylum countries, when working with refugees from anywhere, is ask them what they want. Don't assume that all refugees want the same thing. Some want to integrate, some want to learn language, some just simply want safety and shelter for the shortest amount of time possible. And one of the other things that we've learned in the last 10 years or so is that it's also important that when we're providing support to refugees, to also provide support to local vulnerable populations. If we're giving out free phone cards, if we're giving out free food, if we're giving out free clothing to refugees, it's often important to do that to local vulnerable populations at the same time. Make the services available to both. And the reason for that is that we found in 2015 is that there was a growth of right-wing political thought and right-wing political parties that said, look, these refugees are getting all the entitlements. It wasn't true, by the way, but that's what they said. And they tried to win over the vulnerable populations that felt victims in their own country to a right-wing ideology that said, keep refugees out. That's been different this time, because across Europe and in other countries, the social workers have been really careful to ensure that vulnerable populations are included. They can have the free phone cards, but they can also help in the soup kitchens. They can also be a part in building the community that welcomes refugees. So these things are part of our learning pattern, and we think have played quite an important role in the political response to the situation.
I mean, there are for sure a lot of knowledge that we need to bring with us also when this war at some point will come to an end. I mean, if we were to sort of broaden the perspectives, now we have talked about Ukraine quite a bit, of course, but we are, as we know, living in certain times. But for the future of social works, there are many things that could have an influence on our profession, such as the development of technology, such as an aging population, climate crisis. How do you see the future role of social work in a global or European context?
It is going to change every day, and it's going to change the role of social workers in terms of how we respond, but will never change in terms of values. And because of that, we will always be able to build ourselves according to the changes. And the role of social workers is somehow clear for us. We are not changing people's life. We are creating context and bring knowledge and resources so people can take it and do the changes in their own life. And because of that, we will always have this partnership with people in need or people affected. And this is something unique in social work profession, because we don't have to have all the answers in all the situations, but we have to be sure that in the process, when people are making the changes in their lives, they have the right values around them, the right context. It's exactly what happened with people from Ukraine. They lost. We are we are aware and concerned not to lose the dignity in the process with all the support going to them without them processing this. So because we trust our values, we know that we will be able to adapt all the time to the new challenges together with people that we serve, we work together.
I think social work has a very strong future. Before the pandemic, social work was, and still is, the fastest growing profession in the world. So there's more people being trained in social work than there is in nursing, architecture, engineering, and all of the other disciplines. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is that most government policy agencies know that when you employ a social worker, you get a good return on your economy. Their investment gets a positive return. It's because when you employ a social worker or social workers, crime rates go down, more children go to school, more people go to work, workplace productivity increases, and a whole lot of benefits happen in the communities. So that was accelerated, the understanding of social work was accelerated under the pandemic. Many governments started off thinking this needs a medical response, but they learned very quickly it also needs a social response. In order to find solutions under lockdown, social services had to reshape, and social workers were leading that reshaping in many instances so that they could support vulnerable members in the community under lockdown. We had to ensure that people had, in many parts of the world, access to food and clean water under lockdown. That meant that social workers needed to be exempt from lockdown in order to facilitate those outcomes. So I think social work is getting a much better visibility and understanding than it has had in previous decades, and governments realise that it's absolutely essential to have social work as a profession to run a country and an economy.
It sounds like the future is bright for social workers as well. Is there anything we should be aware of? How do we adapt to changing times?
I think we have to be aware that sometimes the answer we build, it's a totally different answer, because you mentioned climate change and maybe the way we understand to build resources and what kind of resources people will need. Probably this will be different for us, and I think we also need to be aware about the tools around. You said internet, digital life area, planet. So I think it's for us also to adapt permanently. I think we will not be able to do it without permanent training and permanent exchange of experience with others, because in social work profession we can grow only all of us. You cannot grow alone as a professionist, as a professional person. You have to grow together with others. So because of that, I think we have to be together and learn together more than ever, and also to be aware that we are present in people's lives, because the answer today, in this time we are living, is a social answer. That's why we have to be there.
That will not change. Also
that will not change. Yes, will never change.
But for the role and relevance of IFSW, how will this change according to the times changing also?
Oh, look, we're in a constant stream of development. We're constantly learning, constantly shaping. I think Anna said something very important before, which is that our values remain the same. This is supporting people's self-determination. This is recognising their strengths. This is ensuring that people are involved in the decisions that affect them. And this approach has won recognition over the last decade. Now many UN agencies say social work is a key reference point for social development. Because giving aid, which is important, I don't want to say aid isn't important, but giving aid by itself doesn't necessarily unlock the development of people. Sometimes when aid is there for a long time, it actually inhibits people from unlocking their potential as a community. And it's a key role of the social worker in terms of building partnerships, in terms of working with people, in terms of helping them, supporting them, facilitating them to lead their own development, which is key.
Important perspectives. Again, we are getting close to the end of this episode, but we have to try to finish up with some joyful perspectives, of course. There are quite a few highlights in the social work calendar this spring. I mean, as we are recording this, it's only days away when we are going to celebrate International Day for Social Workers. How will you celebrate?
Oh, well, there's celebrations all over the world, and some of them have already started. Actually, some of the national associations call it Social Work Month, but internationally we tend to talk about Social Work Day, which is the third Tuesday of March every year. And this time, both of us, Anna and I, we're here in Oslo at the moment because we are going down to Helsinki and we'll be speaking at their national conference and celebrating social work with our colleagues in Finland.
And as all social workers, we are spending our time with social workers, and it's a great time to share experiences and to create strategies. And I think this is how we are going to spend our World Social Work Day.
And I'd also just like to say happy Social Workers Day to all of the social workers that are listening into this podcast. You, your role, your national association, FO, have made huge contributions to international social work. You're a key player. We really value that. We really value what you do. You're part of the learning process with us, and thank you so much. And we hope that you have a wonderful World Social Work Day as well.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure the social workers listening to this podcast are planning to celebrate the day, and they are, of course, bringing the same compliments back to the both of you. We are finishing up right now. If there is anything like final words of advice you would like to give to the Norwegian social workers. I mean, you gave us some compliments and regarding the celebration now, Rory, but
I think the last word would be big thanks, and also enjoying working with social workers from Norway, enjoying to have their ideas, and I really love working with the Association of Social Workers, and they are very close because one of the member of the association is member of the executive of IFSW, so I'm in contact with ideas from Norway, and I really enjoy sharing and bringing with me your knowledge in this field.
And I'm sure the conversation we have had now has just emphasized the importance of international cooperation. Thank you both so much for these final words and for the conversation. It's been really inspiring, and also best of luck with all the upcoming projects that you have. Og til dere som har lyttet, takk for at dere har fulgt oss. Hvis dere har ubesvarte spørsmål om våre internasjonale samarbeidspartnere, så finner dere både informasjon og relevante lenker på FO sine hjemmesider. Har dere spørsmål eller kommentarer til det vi har snakket om i dag, så må dere gjerne sende oss det på e-post, ta kontakt med dere tillitsvalgte eller fylkesavdeling, og det samme gjelder som alltid hvis dere har forslag til temaer eller gjester som dere mener vi bør ha inn i sosialarbeiderpodden. Vi er tilbake med nye episoder snart, så glem ikke å abonnere på podcasten der du måtte lytte til oss. Og takk igjen til dere som var med oss i dag. Ha en super dag der du måtte befinne deg, og så høres vi snart igjen.